Excellent. Thank you all for joining today. My name is Josh Swinson, and very happy to have Las Vegas Water with us today for a webinar that we have titled From Integration to Insight. We're focused on building a trusted organizational view in utilities. So we're going to talk a little bit about a trusted organizational view, what that means. And then most importantly, we're going to walk through Las Vegas Valley Water's customer journey, a modernization project that they undertook, an integration project that they undertook, and understand deeply their Esri to Maximo integration decisions made there, implementation project, and all of the details that Jimmy is able and willing to share with us today. By way of agenda, just a couple of things. I'll introduce Jimmy in just a second. I'm going to take a couple of minutes and just set the stage. I'm going to talk about what we mean by a trusted organizational view. When we say that, what are we talking about? What are we hoping to provide utilities? How does GeoNexus play a role in that? How did we play a role in that in the Las Vegas Water Project is something Jimmy will talk about more. For those of you that aren't familiar with GeoNexus, some of you probably have a foundational understanding of what we do. Some might not. And so I'm going to take a slide or two just to talk about our core competencies, what our platform does, what our software does, and then the common use cases that we focus our software on or the other utilities are using us for. And so I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because we want to get to the main stage, if you will, and talk about Las Vegas Water's modernization project, their Esri to Maximo integration journey, and a lot of what's happened there, and really focus on how they took on this project to create a trusted organizational view. All right. Quick introduction. Before I do, we will end with questions and answers. So if you have any questions today, please feel free to share those. You should see a tab at the top left of your webinar interface titled Q&A, rightfully so. And then at the bottom of that interface, to the left is where you type your message, hit enter, and it'll send it over to us. I'm going to do my best to incorporate these questions into the presentation as we go. And if it makes sense, if it's relevant in the portion of the presentation that we're talking about, I may ask Jimmy a question and get his feedback on your questions. So please feel free to share those. We love having the questions. We'd love to make it interactive. And so use that space within the webinar interface to do so. All right, quick introduction. As I said, my name is Josh Swinson, VP of Revenue Operations for GeoNexus. And more importantly, I'm really happy to be joined today by Jimmy Bowden, who's a senior GIS developer for Las Vegas Valley Water. I've been able to work with Jimmy for about 18 months now throughout this project, kind of getting it up and running and following along as the project was implemented. Couple things about Jimmy. Jimmy is a GIS guy through and through, and I say that with a lot of admiration. He has a deep knowledge of GIS, a deep knowledge of Esri. But more importantly, one of the things that I really appreciate about Jimmy is his understanding of the role that GIS can play in the modern utility, and where that goes. As I've watched him do his job over the last 18 months is really a deep understanding of how GIS can have a larger seat at the table and how GIS can partner with some of these other systems, other departments, really to create a broader impact, positive impact on his utility specifically. So he has a deep knowledge of GIS and a knowledge of how it works across the organization. I've really admired the way that he's worked through this project. And so with that, Jimmy, I hope I didn't embarrass you there. With that, Jimmy, welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to do this today.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. Keep it coming. Keep it coming.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm with Las Vegas Valley Water District. I've been here almost 20 years, and working in our GIS department and trying to make, like Josh had said, make our GIS be world class is always our goal. So I look forward to kind of talking to you guys today about our project and how we made some really good integrations with our Maximo and GIS.
Excellent. Thanks, Jimmy. Very quickly, and then I'll turn it back over to Jimmy. I want to set the stage. I think one story that's funny from as we were preparing for this, Somewhere along the way, Jimmy referred to Las Vegas Water as our small organization. I'm doing air quotes. And he said, in our small organization, I said, Jimmy, aren't you all responsible for the water show at the Bellagio technically? And he said, well, I guess so. And I said, well, you can't be a small organization if you're in charge of that fun event. So we technically have the owner of the Bellagio water show here, if we can expand reality a little bit. All right, so setting the stage. When we talk about a trusted organizational view, this is some terminology that we talk about a lot here at GeoNexus in terms of what we're trying to provide, where we're trying to help utilities like yours get to, right? Is creating this single trusted organizational view or a trusted organizational view across your entire operations. And so what do we mean when we say that, right? What do we mean as we talk about Las Vegas Water and their goal to gain this? What does this mean? And I thought that I would explain it or start to explain it by talking about what it's not, right? So when we talk to utilities like yours, one of the things that we hear, several of the things that we hear are terms like these, right? We go in and we ask them early on, we say, what are the challenges that you're facing? Why are you bringing us in? What is it that we can do to help? And what is that challenge that you hope we can help through an improved integration strategy or through an improved specific integration? And we hear things, probably terms that you're familiar with, like too many data silos, not enough data integrity, right? Data quality is not there, lack of trust. We hear things like conflicting data. We start to hear about what they're doing to solve this, things like manual workarounds, manual updates, spreadsheets that are in place. One of my favorites, I don't know if it's a favorite, but one that I hear that I find very interesting is this idea of tribal knowledge, right? This idea that there are certain folks that are in charge of the workarounds or certain folks that are in charge of the IP that's connected to making the integration work or making the data connect in the right way so the operations can keep moving forward. And more we're hearing stories about these people that own the IP moving on. Perhaps they're retiring, and that seat is left empty, and that knowledge goes with the person that's retiring, and the organization, the utility, is trying to solve that specific problem. And so we're helping to solve these problems. And for me, it's not, it's no surprise that these problems exist, right? So one of the things that we see is a growing number of systems. You probably see this in your operations as well. Over the last several years, utilities are bringing on more and more systems to run their day-to-day operations. You can see kind of a visualization of what those systems might look like. And with the increase in the number of systems that are being brought in to run the day-to-day operations, there's a massive growth in data, right? And therefore, there's a massive growth in the number of challenges that utilities like yours are trying to solve because of these data challenges. And this is really what we're helping people focus on is solving these specific challenges. Moving away from talking about the challenges a little bit, I want to shift to talk about the opportunity and start to talk about the opportunity of that single trusted organizational view. And I want to do so by paraphrasing a bit of a speech that I heard at the Esri Partner Conference a couple of weeks ago. If there's anyone on the call that was there, you got to enjoy the keynote speech by Jack Dangerman, the founder and president of Esri, and his discussion at the plenary about, this world of integration is the quote that he used. But really what he was talking about is the opportunity around GIS data, moving GIS deeper into the organization, much like Las Vegas Water has done, that we'll hear about in a second. And he started with this quote that I really liked, obviously, for the company that I work for. But he said, we are living in a world of integration, right? Started to talk about the opportunities, started to talk about the challenges that it could break down. And he said, if we really harness geospatial integration in the right way, if we shift our strategy in the right way, it can do several things. It can break down silos of specialization. It can create a framework of global knowledge. And the one that I like the most, it can create a system of understanding and collaboration. And he noted by saying, we can do all of this by bringing information together. So I thought that was a great way to kind of explain the opportunity in front of us that we're talking about today. So what does this look like in your specific organization, And some of this might, it might resonate with you. It might cause nightmares with you. But this is what we see as we talk to organizations to really kind of end the explanation of this idea of operational truth. We see disconnected systems, right? When we walk in, we see systems that, maybe you have a selection of systems like this, your tech stack looks like this, and you have a scenario where there's an asset that's installed in GIS, according to GIS in 2019. Work management lists that asset as being installed in 2021. The asset management system has it being installed in 2020. And the financial record system has no understanding of this asset at all. There's no information at all. And what we see happening, and again, this might resonate, is that nobody trusts any of the systems because they all have different data. They all have a different source of truth or understanding of the truth, and therefore trust is completely eroded. And so working together is something that is really, really difficult based on that erosion of trust. And so what we do is we come in, and the hope is that we will connect these different systems and we'll start to unify this data. And then from there, what starts to happen is we start to see through consistent connected data across these systems, field crews and business analysts and people that are in the back office, all working off the same data, working from the same picture. And ultimately what that leads to is this layer of truth that blankets the organization, therefore creating kind of that trusted organizational view, bringing trust back into the organization and really improving and increasing the collaboration, as Jack Dangermond said, across the organization, right? So that's the goal. That's what we're talking about when we talk about a trusted organizational view. That's really the goal of the proper integration strategy. That's what we're going to talk about today with Jimmy through the Las Vegas Water customer story. But before I do that, as promised, I want to just touch quickly on GeoNexus. Jimmy's going to talk about GeoNexus a little bit within here. And for those that aren't familiar, just a little bit about what our product does. Our product is the GeoNexus integration platform. The slide that I have here highlights our core competencies. To start with, I'll start with the bottom. The GeoNexus integration platform, or GIP, as we often refer to it. And for those of you that have been in the space for a while and might know the terminology GeoWorks Sync, effectively the same product. GIP is our 2.0 version of the modern version of GeoWorks Sync, just to kind of bring everybody into the same room. We start with the library of connectors. These are productized connectors that understand the business logic of the different systems here, and really make it easy to connect these systems for today's conversation, Esri and IBM Maximo, connect them through simple login connections, get them talking to each other, and then moving to the top, give you the ability to pull down the data sources that you need to unify, to synchronize, use mapping functionality in the GeoNexus user interface to simply connect those, right? To pull down different fields and say, when something's updated in this field, I want the Maximo side to be represented in this field. When something is created in this field in Maximo, I want it to be created in this field in Esri, so on and so forth. After that is done, the platform allows you to automate the synchronization of data. You can do this one direction, bidirectionally. You have some flexibility around that. You have some flexibility around the frequency with which data runs. You can do that in near real time. You can do that segmented. So you can take a segment of data and say, for this critical data, I would like it to run every 5 minutes. For the rest of data, I want it to run on a nightly basis. So you have some choices that you can make in there to automate the synchronization of data. And then lastly, it provides active reporting. So it gives you issue and error notifications if something fails in the midst of day-to-day operations. And then it provides you a nightly report that shows throughout the report, it shows you the number of creates, number of updates, number of orphans, gives you a rundown to help you understand that the integration is working as intended. Okay? And so with that, I'll talk a little bit about the product in action and some of the common use cases, and then I'll turn it over to Jimmy. Some of these might be familiar with to you. Of course, GIS and asset management is a key use case. We're going to talk about that today. Moving work orders into different systems, whether it's into GIS, for visualization, that's a common one that we see. The management of assets across their life cycle, right, is something that is a project that we often take on, and integration plays a role in that. A key one right now, for those of you that are moving over to the utility network, We're doing a lot of projects that are effectively Esri to Esri synchronizations, where we're connecting the UN to the GN and synchronizing data because, as we all know at this point, that move to Esri's UN, not an overnight move. And so for several organizations, or for organizations, it's taking several years. And we're helping to connect that data so they can work off the same systems, and also any legacy applications that are still hooked up to the GN, those continue to work. All right. We're also working in field mobility, helping to connect apps for the field, as we talked about in kind of that ideal state slide that I had, so that field workers are working off the same data in the applications they're working in. And then lastly, one of the things that we're leveraging our REST API connector for more and more is helping for commercial systems or proprietary systems to connect those to GIS, right? Maybe they're smaller systems. Maybe they're systems we don't have a productized connector for. We're using that to get deeper and deeper into this multi-point integration strategy that a lot of the utilities that we're working with have. And then we're working with partners to connect to their systems. Maybe they have other EAMs. Maybe they have other systems that they have created, other software companies that are operating heavily in the GIS space, working to use our connector to connect them to Esri and them to other systems, right? So some common use cases, happy to discuss those more offline if needed. But for right now, let's turn it over to Jimmy. And Jimmy, I'll turn it over and let you walk us through, and I'll just advance the slides as you tell me to. So thanks again for being here, and happy to hear your story.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Yeah, we'll go ahead and just start with a little bit of an introduction of Las Vegas Valley Water District. We are the main water provider for the city of Las Vegas, the internationally known city, and also various parts of Clark County, unincorporated Clark County as well. And we do have a pretty sizable system. We have over 450,000 customers, actual customer accounts. And you can see some of the stats here. We do pump quite a bit of water on a daily basis. So we do have our kind of our core technology. We are an Esri ArcGIS user, have been for several years. We are recently gone to IBM Maximo, and we'll talk a lot more about that as we move forward. And then we do have a lot of other enterprise systems that we're trying to work with, finance, HR, purchasing, those types of other systems. And we are also a Microsoft heavy user of Microsoft, SharePoint, Power BI, those kind of technologies. Kind of just set the stage for what we kind of have in our organization. Go ahead, next slide. So yeah, GIS has been a big part of our operations for a long time. Like I said, I've been here for 20 plus years. Our GIS was already fairly mature when I stepped in 2006. And so we've got this pretty robust system. So yeah, 600 plus users a month, which there's about 40% of our workforce is using our GIS every single month, which I think is a pretty good achievement for us. Josh had mentioned utility network. We actually were a fairly early adopter. We moved to the utility network back in 2021. So we've actually been on that for several years now. Not fully capable, in 2021, but we've been building our capabilities on top of it for the last 5 years or so. And then we have a real strategy that we want to be upgrading to ArcGIS Enterprise latest versions within a 12 to 18 month window. We don't want to get so far behind that we're struggling to upgrade. So we try to kind of keep that cadence of let's keep ourselves upgraded, in that cycle so that we don't get too far behind. And we do have a really solid, dedicated team that does data editing, and that's their full time. They're not doing anything but GIS data editing. And so we have a really capable team that really pumps in a lot of data for us. And I think this bottom part really is key. Is as an organization, we identify that our GIS is an enterprise platform. It is something that enables business decisions throughout the organization to really do their day-to-day operations. All right, next. So I'll kind of pivot and talk a little bit about our CMMS, our legacy CMMS. So we were working with this legacy CMMS for 20 plus years. We went through some various vendor acquisitions of the software that we were using that really made it challenging to kind of have an upgrade plan. And it really was hard to modernize or do any enhancements. It really kind of became very stale. very difficult to kind of work with. It was a desktop only solution. There's like no web, no field. It was so, but because it was so integrated into the organization, that there was a big risk to kind of moving forward and moving off of it. So it really was a big challenge for the organization to like, how are we going to get to this next, to a more modern platform? How are we going to get off this old work management system when, as the kind of, again, like the bottom line here, it says, it was doing what it needed to do. We could get our guys out in the field working on stuff. They could track their labor, materials, all the things that at a CMMS really needs to do, it was doing. So it really was, a challenge to kind of like, okay, we really need to evolve, but it's going to be a real big effort. And so then next slide, we'll talk a little bit about, what we did. So beginning in 2022, we decided to go through a multi-year effort to modernize our asset management. Obviously, we're going to replace that legacy CMMS, and we chose to use IBM Maximo's EAM as our replacement. And we really wanted to kind of build upon what we've been doing, in our organization, and have those capabilities that a modern platform is going to give us. Those capabilities of cloud infrastructure and just improving the modernization, getting off that old platform, getting on something that's new, or that's not legacy. And we did want to kind of get into like expanding into like lifecycle management, and not just work management and labor management and those kind of things. And so then and also being able to really integrate with our different systems, our finance and our procurement. Really get into that reporting and analytics, something that we've struggled with because of our system being so outdated, and then obviously field solutions as well. And then at the bottom, we talk a little bit about GIS as well. So this is kind of where we were at back in 2022, and we've kind of moved forward to this project where we've integrated with, or not integrated, but deployed IBM Maximo to our organization. Next slide. So obviously, hopefully you all are somewhat familiar with IBM. I'm not here to talk too much about IBM, but it provides a lot of those capabilities that I was talking about, where it has that work and asset lifecycle management that really, really brings us up to the more modern age. Obviously, for us, inventory and requisition is super important. How do we buy things and get the crews the tools and the parts that they need to do their job out in the field? So that was very important to us to get those capabilities, and then also being able to integrate with our finance systems and our other systems that we have. And yeah, as Josh mentioned, you're starting to grow these systems. You start having more and more systems, and they're all kind of doing their own thing, and trying to get to that point where we don't want to have our systems just be doing their own thing. And so then obviously, I kind of talked about just being behind the curve a little bit, but being able to do preventive and predictive maintenance, and understanding where our failures might be coming from is going to be a huge thing for us as we move forward. And then, like I mentioned, being on a cloud platform, being on a modern architecture, really helps us to be able to scale as we move forward, and we start to find these other opportunities to build our data. Next.
Hey, Jimmy, can I jump in and ask a question real quick? Just because, again, I have some familiarity with the project and how you all work together internally. One of the things that I found, to be a little bit different about your project than some of the other projects that we're involved in is, how the Maximo team was brought in, how your EAM team was involved, right? You're obviously on the GIS side of things, but you guys did a great job of working together early. Are there any findings around that? Was there any secret sauce that came to, conversations that you had as you moved to this to get the GIS and EAM teams kind of rowing in the same direction? Because there are often times where one of the teams is kind of brought in at the end of the project to bless the project. Not the case with you all. You guys were, early on together. Anything that you can point to that led to that collaboration early on in the project?
Yeah, actually, we weren't really, we were kind of an afterthought. We heard that we were going to be going to a new, an EAM, and we kind of said, hey, myself and a couple of other GIS staff reached out to the project manager and said, hey, what is going to be our role in this? We feel like we have a pretty valuable role that we could play. And I said, hey, let's talk and let's get together and have a brief conversation about what we can do and what we've already been doing as an asset management. I mean, GIS absolutely was being used as an asset management system for a number of years because there was nothing there, to use. So that was one of the big things, is we kind of pushed ourselves onto the project. And then once we started having those conversations, I think there was a real realization that, our capabilities and what we've already collected in terms of the amount of data was really valuable. And so that was kind of how we got into that early on. Was we showed our value early on, and the organization kind of like, oh yeah, you're right. Let's make sure we approach this in the right way.
That's awesome. I'm gonna take us back a slide, I think, because of a question that we got that I think is a good one. The specific question is around how many UN data editors you have on your water drafting team. But why don't you take that question and roll it into a little bit of a breakdown around what your team looks like from a GIS perspective?
Okay, sure, yeah. So we basically operate, two GIS, kind of two core GIS teams, and then we have some IT support as well. But we have a GIS apps team, which right now I think we've got 4 people that do specifically GIS apps. They are the ones that are running our custom viewer. They're deploying line of business apps, dashboards, all the good stuff that you can do with Esri. And then we do have a team of an editing team, which is actually, I'm a part of that team. I'm a developer on that team. We have 2 developers on that team, and we actually have 12 data editors doing our day-to-day editing. And if you've ever been to Las Vegas and you drive out of off the strip, you kind of keep going and you keep going, and there's this kind of what we would call suburban sprawl. And so we are constantly building here in Las Vegas, and so we've got to have a big team to keep up with all that new build that goes on here.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Jimmy. I'll move to the next slide. There you are. So you're going to talk a little bit about Maximo Spatial and how you were looking at this.
Yep.
As part of the project.
Yeah. So as we kind of started to work on this project, and like I said, we in the GIS, we tried to get involved early. And one of the things that our consultant that we were working with for IBM, they were really like, yeah, Maximo Spatial can do does a lot of capabilities. We should definitely leverage that. But as we kind of evolved the project, we started to see there was some cracks in that Maximo Spatial foundation. And we were hearing from others as well. We were kind of talking to different people in the industry and saying, hey, look, we're moving to Maximo. Oh, yeah, we did that, or we're planning to do something similar. And then we were kind of hearing some inklings that, like, oh, you maybe need to think about some other alternatives to Maximo Spatial. So like I said, as we got into the project, we started to answer some questions. And I mentioned we have a GIS apps team that manages a custom app, and those guys put together a really fantastic experience for our users. And they've had that in place for a number of years. So as we're kind of working on this, like, there's a map tab in Maximo that has a map capability, and it really was a second-class experience from what we were already providing. And so what we kind of started to do with that piece of it was, as you can see on the right, here's a Valve kind of attribute set. And what we decided to do is, rather than try to use that map tab in Maximo, we wanted to enable our users in our existing app to interact with Maximo. And so what they've done is built this really nice linking system, where if you see down at the bottom, we have the ability to link right to a location. You can go right to start a work order, start an SR, those kind of capabilities, just right from our GIS, right to that specific location, and build your work off of that. So that was kind of our first foray into, like, let's not really work with the Maximo Spatial map piece. And then as we kind of continued to evolve, we started to realize that there was that spatial syncing component that we started to build. And I started to have some concerns around data integrity. I really felt like we were in this position where Maximo was going to come grab some data out of GIS, throw it into Maximo, and then, hey, we're all good. And there was like, are we really getting that kind of that trust that we want as an organization, that the correct data is in both places, and that we're really seeing that synchronization really work well. And then that concept of data drift, right? It's like, over time, like, things get out of sync, and then when you're kind of doing this kind of looser integration, you don't really know how things are going very well. And so one of the things that was kind of a big sticking point for me was, who's going to own this synchronization? We have a great IT team, but they're generalists. They're working on that. They're working on all the different apps. They're working on our EAM, obviously, our financial systems. They don't really understand the GIS data as well as we do as GIS professionals. So I really wanted to kind of like make sure that we had some ownership in this, because our data is so critical. And then the kind of final nail in the coffin for that was we were, as I mentioned, we want to be upgrading on our ArcGIS Enterprise like on a regular cadence, and we wanted to move to the 11.1 version during the middle of the Maximo project. And we started to work with them, and they said, well, IBM's not certifying that version yet. So if we have issues, they're not going to be able to support us in the way we want. And that was kind of a frustrating point for us, because as I said, we want to be moving forward. So like we're kind of like, are we going to get locked in like this version lock with Maximo? So we took those things and said, like, let's see if there's some other approaches, or what's some other approaches that we can evaluate on that. And so if you go to the next slide, we'll actually talk a little bit about those approaches that we looked at. So obviously talked a little bit about Maximo Spatial Sync. And obviously it has that capability to talk to Esri, and obviously it knows Maximo because it is Maximo. But it really didn't work with the branch versioning and utility network that we had deployed. There was some inconsistencies with how you could actually interact with a version, and so a lot of our synchronization was going to have to go through default, which was something we weren't super comfortable with. And then the other big thing with that was that there was the reporting void, I think is there, where, yeah, it's doing a lot of logging, and that logging is getting into like the Maximo logs, but they're really deep in the Maximo logs, and you can't really tease that out super easily unless you're like, pretty sophisticated Maximo user. So we had some issues with that. So one of the other technologies that we use quite a bit here is FME. Hopefully you're familiar with that product, but and it's an integration tool. And we kind of did some evaluations with it, and really what we found was it was very much lacking in that ability to talk Maximo. Obviously, it knows it can talk ArcGIS all day long, but talking Maximo was really going to be a big point of contention for us. Obviously, branch versioning and all the other things that it's capable of doing, but that one big thing was it doesn't talk Maximo. And obviously, we thought about maybe doing some custom code. All the headaches with custom code, you're going to have to write our own, logic to interact with these different things. Learn how to, not learn, but write how to access versioning, all those different things. You can do all of this, right? But custom code just has inherent, difficulties. So at a user conference a couple years ago, we kind of started looking at GeoNexus, and yeah, they are natively speaking Esri. They're natively speaking Maximo. They're supporting branch version, utility networks. All those capabilities are just out of the box, relatively straightforward to set up. And then there's this reporting component that Josh kind of touched on a minute ago, that was really, really beneficial, because it tells you exactly what's going on with these systems as the integration runs. And it's not a log file. It's actually a nice PDF report. So that was one of the big capabilities that GeoNexus provided that we really thought was going to be a win for us. So that's how kind of we ended up going to the GeoNexus solution. Next slide.
Yeah, Jimmy, as we move into talking about the implementation overview, and I'll shift this for us. I think you brought up FME and talking about FME. This is a question we get a lot, right? We talk about kind of the differences between the two, between GeoNexus Integration Platform and FME, different use cases they're used for, and how they collaborate sometimes. I mean, we do have customers. I know City of Henderson, who's a neighbor of yours, who I know you talk to. They use both collaboratively, and they have some real defined use cases around using both of those. If that's a question in the mind of anyone listening, there's some stuff up on our website. We have a couple of blog posts, maybe even 3, that we've kind of described the differences in the way things work together. And so I find myself handing that information out a lot because it's a common question. So I thought I'd stop and point to it. So Jimmy, at this point, walk us through, what implementation looks like. Another place where we get a lot of questions, right? What does the project look like? This sounds great. What work are we going to have to do? So help us understand what that looked like from a Las Vegas Water perspective.
Yeah. So once we kind of got our contracts and all that stuff all figured out, we got GeoNexus ready to go. We chose to do an onboarding approach with them, and essentially there's a software component. Obviously, we're buying software from them, but there's also this kind of like how do we use the software, and how do we get ourselves up to speed with this? So what they did when they provided for us was basically an onboarding project where we set out some time to do some design. How are we gonna make this work? What are the things that we want to focus on in our project, and what GIS integrations do we want to build? And so what we did is we talked about, like, we're going to work on these 4 integrations, like our valves, our fire hydrants, our backflows, and our pipelines were kind of the 4 key that we had chosen during the kind of like discovery phase of the project. And then the kind of next phase was like the actual implementation, where their implementation specialists and ourselves, we got into a room kind of like this, a Teams kind of call, where I was actually on the keyboard, and they were kind of telling me, driving me around. I was driving and they were kind of steering, here, you go here, click there. And so we had like those 4 use cases I had mentioned. And then over the course of 2 months, we would work like once a week, every week for 4 to 6 hours, a couple of different sessions. And throughout those 2 months, instead of just building those 4 layers, we actually built out our entire 22, because once we got the cadence going, and we were able to kind of go back and forth with these, like, oh, this was a simple use case. Okay, let's build this one out real quick. Oh, this is a way more complicated one. Let's work on that one. And so it was really great to kind of like, we had this plan of like, oh, we'll try to get a couple of these set up in this 2 months. And then by the time we, started ramping up, the product was easy enough to use that we were able to get our entire thing done within in the scope of that engagement. And so then once we had that kind of like all set up, then they delivered some training resources to us and helped us in, like, hey, how do we do these things in the future? And then we kind of finished up and that once the kind of the project was done, it kind of becomes like there's a support cycle, and as we kind of run into like little issues, and their support system is really solid as well. I've got open a ticket and get really good responses. So that's kind of how we had that project work for us.
That's awesome. And Jimmy, you mentioned the onboarding. You used the term onboarding a couple of times in there. Just to clarify, what we're talking about there. There's a couple different ways that you can implement GeoNexus as a product. One of the ways that has become more and more popular, really our goal with the platform, is to give you, in this case, Las Vegas Water, or your utility, the ability to really harness the power of the tool to own the integration work, right? And so what Jimmy's talking about is they chose the path. One path is full implementation. Our professional services team kind of does everything in terms of configuration. The more common one, from a growing perspective, is that a team like Jimmy's will take on the implementation, and our team will come in with a couple of data sets and really kind of show them the way, right? Teach them to fish, to follow that language, and help them understand through a couple of data sets how to configure, train them on how to use the tool, because ultimately you can then use the tool to not only build out the remaining data sets, but perhaps move on to expanded opportunities in terms of integration to other systems. And so, I thought Jimmy's team did a great job of this, for sure. Jimmy, a little bit about the solution architecture there.
Yeah, so it's really pretty straightforward once you kind of get the hang of it, and it's a nice user experience, nice GUI experience where you say, I want to connect over to my GIS server, and as I do that, I connect to a specific service, and once I connect to that service, it actually will start populating fields for you and say, hey, these are the fields you have available, and you can start like lining those up. And then same thing with the Maximo side, where you get access to like business objects inside Maximo, and you can start to, as you drill down into the right business object, it'll start filling in those fields. So you can start to go, oh, I'm working on a valve, and a valve has a manufacturer in GIS. Oh, there's a valve manufacturer on a Maximo location. Oh, or actually a Maximo asset, or a location, either one. And so we were able to, with that user interface, really streamline, and just, it's a lot of point and click and really straightforward. It's what you see is what you get. Is very it's very nice to have that capability of being able to see those, what you're going to get before you even push the button and actually run a synchronization. There's no like JSON file editing kind of stuff like you have with a Maximo Spatial. I mean, there are files like that you can modify if you need to do bulk updating. So it has both of those kind of built in, that nice kind of user experience where you kind of do a lot of configuration, but there's also that ability to kind of pull up that file in the background and do some mass updates and stuff. So really, it really has that kind of flexibility and ability to like communicate with these systems without having to have deep knowledge. I'm not a Maximo expert. I mean, I'm pretty savvy with GIS, but I wasn't a Maximo expert. I'm probably still not. But I was able to kind of understand through the integrate or through the tool to how to click and get the different pieces of information from Maximo.
That's awesome. Tell us a little bit about the results as we kind of move to the closing here, and then there are a couple other questions that are in just for the audience. I see those. We'll come back to those in just a second in our Q&A. Thank you for those. So tell us where you're at today. The impact of this journey. Perhaps where you're headed going forward.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely feel really good about how our assets are being synchronized between the systems. Like I can get a report and say, I have 150,000 valves in GIS. I have 150,000 valves in Maximo, and all of the data is in alignment. So we've got that reporting capability, as I mentioned, that's there. We've really got that nailed in. That data drift that I mentioned. I feel like we're going to be in a position where that data drift is not going to be an issue. If we stay on top of it. Obviously there's some level of effort from our side to make sure that's that we're staying up with that. But yeah, I think the hope is that people will start to see that the same information that they're seeing in their GIS viewer is the same information that they're seeing in Maximo, and they can be confident that, oh yeah, this is the same data. I'm working on the right data. And that's kind of I think that's where we're really headed for. I mean, I don't know that we're totally there yet, but yeah, that ability to trust the data, I think has been greatly expanded from where we were a couple of months ago.
Awesome. All right, the funnest slide in the deck, I think. I always like these during these type of webinars. Tell us what you learned, and then tell us where you're headed next.
I think a big takeaway for us was, be ready for change. We were in this position where the project had scoped out that we were going to use Maximo Spatial, and I think our team did a really great job of looking at these other options, talking to other people, seeing what other pain points people were having, and then kind of pivoting into GeoNexus as a solution, and not being afraid to take that on like in the middle of the project. I think that was really really valuable, that we didn't let the fear of, oh, it's going to mess our project timelines up. And I mean, I did hear that, like, don't mess our project timeline up. And we absolutely did not. We came in, with plenty of time to spare. So yeah, that's a big learning thing. And the idea that we're trying to build this trust, and this is a really good way to start doing that. And it's just going to get more and more as more data gets collected, as we move forward with these modernizing technologies. There's just going to be more data, and we're going to need to have these kind of tools that allow us to and enable us to move data around as we move forward.
Awesome. What's next?
Yeah, so I think we'll start to look at some other options. I think the organization really is going to be looking at how do we support field mobility? How do we get our field crews getting the technology that they're using really ramped up? So we'll be working in that space probably in the next several years. I know the reporting and analytics is going to be huge. I mean, that's, like I said, there's just all this data being collected. And like, how do we make meaningful information out of that data, right? You've got this mountain of data. We want to make that into meaningful information. So we're going to be working on those reporting and analytic capabilities. And yeah, like the whole concept of this presentation is like, let's get a trusted view of the data. And I think that's going to be some of the core things that we can work on, is like, let's get to a point where we are, as a GIS, as an EAM, as an organization, we're presenting the same information, and people can trust it, and they're not going, well, I was in the finance system and it didn't say this, so I'm not sure. We don't want to be in that position anymore. We want to be in a position where people are confident with how our data looks.
Perfect. Last slide, then we'll get to Q&A. I know we're running up on time here. Just a couple of key takeaways to leave you with, to leave in the deck, and we'll obviously share this recording with you. And maybe this becomes obvious, and maybe this is why you're here, right? But we've kind of laid out the idea that integration is no longer optional, right? And doing integration the right way is something that it's the conversation we're having more and more every day. I think that's why folks come to us, right? As they're trying to modernize their integration. And so, if you're thinking through your strategy, I thought Jimmy did a great job of kind of laying out perhaps pitfalls. That might be too strong a word, but the pitfalls of going down the custom development path in this day and age, right? And especially as these systems grow and the number of systems grow and the amount of data grows. So having the right integration strategy, no longer optional, right? We've talked a lot about the trusted organizational view and what that requires, right? And the opportunity that it presents for your team. This one's always in there, right? The journey matters. I thought Jimmy's team did a great job of planning. I thought Jimmy's GIS team specifically did a great job of finding their place in the project, understanding, again, the pain that existed, the challenges that existed, what they were really focused on, what was the objective of this project, and building from there. That is a key that we see in all of the projects that we're a part of. And so I think that that's a good one to mention. And, obviously, I think it's great that we're seeing real organizational impact, not only with Jimmy's team, but also with, the other teams that we're working with, right? This idea of creating a trusted organizational view is not just an opportunity. It has real impact on the business. Putting the work in matters, right? And so hopefully you found some of these key takeaways. Hopefully you found some others in what Jimmy put forth. And Jimmy, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this. Couple of questions that we have. Jimmy, I think this one's for you specifically. Are you planning on using Maximo Mobile for any of the field mobility initiatives that might be outside of your team? Any response to that?
Yeah, so we do. We actually have a few teams that are using Maximo Mobile right now. Our biggest team is not, because they had a mature process, and that we didn't want to take on that other piece of the equation while we were building this other phase. So they're kind of outside of it, but we do have a few teams, like I said, some of the smaller teams, and I say smaller, but 10 to 15 people, that are actually using Maximo Mobile with some success at this point, being able to do to get their work out to them in the field. So we are doing a little bit of Maximo Mobile, not our entire organization, but we do have some use cases.
And Jimmy, what version of Maximo is your team on? Do you want to talk about versions real quick? We might have done this in one of the slides, but what version are you on?
We're on MAS 9.1. Maybe only 9.0. We're one of the nines. I'm not exactly sure specifically, but
so MAS 9. That's great. I'll answer. There's another question in it that's a great segue. So there's a question about. There's kind of a lead in, and it says that this organization has agreements with both Esri and IBM to keep their environment versions up to date. And it's asking the question, how does GeoNexus do this? This is going way back to your statement about version lock, right? So what we talk about at GeoNexus is this idea of version lock, that you're trying to move to, say it's MAS 9. In the case of Jimmy's organization, perhaps you're moving to the UN. Perhaps you're just upgrading to the most recent version of either of those products, and you're stuck because your integration can't move there, right? That's really one of the benefits that we offer. So we have a full development team that is constantly working on the GeoNexus integration platform to make sure that it is keeping up with the latest version of the different systems you're on, the several systems you're integrating with GeoNexus as your middleware. And then the question goes on to ask, how often does GeoNexus require an update? And I want to focus on that. So we do releases at least on a quarterly basis, right? Sometimes they're minor, sometimes they're a little bit more major. Again, all in an effort to keep up with the latest version of all of these systems that we're integrating to. How often we require an update is really up to you, right? We'll share with you what is needed. We don't necessarily require that you update every time. But there will be obvious instances where you'll want to update based on that. I can get deeper into that. Feel free to email me. We'll share my email at the end of this as we kind of send out the recording. And so for the person that asked that question, feel free to email me more specifics about your use case, and I'm happy to help there. Jimmy, one last one for you before we're up on time. I'm going to ask a little bit of a before and after question because there's kind of two pieces, two different questions. what did the data cleanup look like for you all before you got into this, if you had visibility into that? And then the after, what's ongoing maintenance look like? Now that you're up live and running, what is managing, all of this integration and all that we've talked about today look like for you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, really, the data maintenance or the data cleanup is it's just an ongoing thing. I mean, if anybody has perfect data, great. I would love to see it. I would really love to see someone that has perfect data. But yeah, so that's just really like core business. We're always cleaning up our data, and that's where this really helps us out, because as we clean up the older data, we need to be able to make sure that it gets over into Maximo correctly. So, we didn't do like an initiative to get a bunch of data clean. I mean, we did a couple of smaller things to kind of like some one-off, like let's get some, spend some time and clean up a few things, but it really was pretty minor because we knew we were going to have this integration for the long run, and we knew we were going to be finding data issues as we move forward, as we hit assets in the field that haven't been touched in 15, 20 years that maybe don't have the best information. So that's just like kind of an ongoing thing, but we did, a little bit of here and there. As we move forward, same kind of thing. I do get like the nightly reports, and I do see, issues, and I'm looking into those, or I'm getting requests from specific business users. They're like, hey, my backflow doesn't have the right information, and we basically have a process for them to ask those questions of our GIS editors, and get that back to them in a timely fashion. So we've got some business processes in place that allow us to do those kind of things fairly seamlessly at this point.
Excellent. That was a great one to close out on. Just a quick thank you again, Jimmy, for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate all your knowledge, sharing it, being willing to share. There are a couple more questions that came in that we didn't get to. We will make sure to follow up specifically with those individuals. We have your name, and we'll follow up with those and can have a conversation through email to answer your questions there. Really happy with the amount of questions that we got here. So thank you for taking the time to put those in to all that have joined. And we really appreciate you taking the opportunity to join today, to spend your lunch with us, or you're just after lunch with us, wherever you may be. Great discussion, great information. Thank you, Jimmy. And we'll look forward to seeing all of you on the next one. We'll send the recording out after this. Please feel free to contact myself through email with any questions that you have. But thanks for joining us. Thank you, Jimmy.